Hello there. Welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello.
A big show for you this week. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones is being forced to sell his stuff to repay the people he defamed. Our guest, Jon Ronson, will tell us what he thinks makes Alex Jones tick.
Also this week, the presidential campaign is awash with misleading edits and fake news. We're going to bust some major malarkey. But first...
Former President Donald Trump returned to the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. this week for the first time since he tried to stop members of Congress recognising his election defeat to Joe Biden.
I've had a really great relationship with just about everybody here, and just about all of the senators. And if it wasn't fantastic, it gets worked out. And we have one thing in mind, and that's making our country great.
It was all designed to be a display of unity behind the Republican presidential nominee, and so it was, even if some former rivals may have been experiencing some complicated feelings. Penny for your thoughts, Ted Cruz. Reporters were keen to see how senators, including Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, would receive the former president. A reminder, this was Mitch McConnell just 3 weeks after those deadly January 6, 2021 attacks on the Capitol building by Trump supporters.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible.
And here was Mitch this week after meeting Trump for the first time since then.
Senator, how was it seeing the former president?
We had a good meeting. But we shook hands.
Not only did the pair shake hands, reportedly the two also shared a fist bump. Only two Republican senators boycotted the Trump meeting, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine. Although clearly not everybody who was there was on side, there were a few leaks.
Behind closed doors, sources tell ABC News Trump criticized Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the city in a key swing state set to host the Republican National Convention, calling it, quote, horrible.
Not true, says Trump.
The Democrats are making up stories that I said Milwaukee is a horrible city. That is false, a complete lie. Don't be duped. Who would say such a thing with that important state in the balance?
Who indeed? One person in the room told the Notice website that Trump was rambling and likened the experience to talking to your drunk uncle at a family reunion, Chaz.
Look, I don't think this is the biggest deal in the world. Biden did win 70% of the Milwaukee vote in 2020. It's not exactly in play. But I'll tell you what I find funny about all this is that the Republicans didn't bother to get their story straight before they ran out and tried to cover for Trump. So, for instance, one congressman said that Trump was specifically talking about crime and the crime rate in Milwaukee. Another Republican said that Trump was referencing the ongoing political game that the city was playing with their announcement of where the First Amendment protest zone will be at the convention. Sure. Another said that Trump didn't say this at all. But then another Republican said that Trump did say those words, but they're only about elections.
In that context, he said the sentence about Milwaukee, and he was absolutely referring to the elections and the way the elections are run in the city of Milwaukee.
And then that first guy who said that Trump never said this, actually he changed his mind and then he came up with the most baffling explanation yet.
What context do you place it in? What was he referring to? Was it crime? Was it the elections? I've heard all of the above.
We're having a broad conversation about the challenges we face as a country, in particular the challenges that we've seen in Milwaukee. There are real challenges in Milwaukee that need to be addressed. It was a broad conversation covering a lot of topics in a lot of cities, but broadly speaking here is what's important is Wisconsin is an amazing place to live and raise a family in.
So that's why Trump said Milwaukee's a horrible place. Of course! For his part, Trump chose two explanations at once.
I think it was very clear what I meant. I said we're very concerned with crime. I love Milwaukee. I have great friends in Milwaukee, but it's, as you know, the crime numbers are terrible and we have to be very careful. But I was referring to also the election.
See, I don't think it's clear what you meant at all. And then the next day, Trump was denying he ever said it, as you quoted before, John. So the only people not confused by all that were the Democrats, who immediately rushed out and bought a bunch of billboards around Milwaukee, reveling in the whole mess. They loved it.
Yes, a mess it was. Meanwhile, President Trump turned 78 on Friday, and he's been getting a lot of birthday greetings from supporters in Las Vegas, And in Detroit. Don Jr. sent a birthday tweet, "Happy birthday, Dad!" Although former First Lady Melania Trump, who was also absent from her husband's side during his recent criminal trial, was again conspicuous in her silence, the Daily Beast proclaiming, "Everyone but Melania sends Trump a public birthday shout-out." The Biden-Harris campaign even got into the act with a rather snarky tweet.
Here are 78 of Donald Trump's accomplishments for his 78th birthday.
And a lot of those accomplishments included indictments and bankruptcies, although top of the list was...
Donald fell asleep a lot.
But easily the worst rendition of Happy Birthday came at Trump's own Mar-a-Lago party.
It's someone's birthday. Join with me. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, President Trump.
There's nowhere else I'd rather be on my birthday.
Fact check on that, false.
Yeah, look, it's been a big week for Trump on the campaign trail, John. He also revealed what might be his most successful policy suggestion for the entire campaign so far.
I will eliminate taxes on tips for restaurant workers and hospitality workers and anyone else relying on tips. No more taxes on tips. No taxes on tips. None.
No taxes on tips. 4 simple words. Obviously, a policy targeted directly at working class people, often non-white working class people, particularly in, hypothetically speaking, Las Vegas. Nevada is a swing state, of course, and it's a relatively cheap policy compared to most tax cut proposals out there. The Committee for a Responsible Budget estimates it would reduce revenue by $150 to $250 billion over 10 years. So that's 15 to 25 billion per year, depending on how much tip income grows. So that isn't too bad in the context of the trillions of dollars that people spend on these kinds of promises. And the early signs are that this could be an effective vote winner.
I did talk with some hotel workers yesterday, some service workers here in Las Vegas, about how that is playing with them. And Anne-Marie, about 6 people told me that would change their vote. That is enough to make them switch from voting Democrat to Republican if Donald Trump is promising something like that to them.
Trump's also come up with a pretty smart marketing campaign for this policy as well.
And we need to spread the word so that every time you leave a tip for the next 5 months, you put on the receipt, vote for Trump, because there's no tax on tips.
And as you can see, Trump supporters are already doing this. If even only the super hardcore Trump fans did this for 5 months, it would reach a huge number of otherwise very hard to reach people, or should I say, voters. Anyway, we're going to be talking a lot more about this on Friday's show, but in that spirit of reaching less traditional Republican voters, Trump also held an event at the 180 Church in Detroit, where he appeared to receive a warm reception.
President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In fact, that event seemed to be stunningly successful.
You got Donald Trump in Detroit talking to 8,000 people, and then at a black church, of course.
Wow, 8,000 people! Except the only problem is, at least shortly before Trump spoke, it wasn't clear where the other 7,800 people were going to fit in that church. And photos suggested there wasn't exactly a huge black turnout. According to Detroit Public Radio, it was a 50-50 racial split at best, and I think that's generous. And of the 8 black Trump voters the reporter spoke to, just 1 was from Detroit and 0 were church congregants. So I guess, John, you can't win them all.
No, but you can try it on, I suppose. Next week, the first presidential debate will be held at CNN headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, and we will have full coverage with a special fireside chat on Friday, June 28th on ABC News. Joe Biden and Donald Trump have accepted CNN's invitation to be there, and they've accepted conditions like microphones will be muted throughout the debate, except for the candidate whose turn it is to speak. Thank God for that. And the absence of a studio audience as well. The big question now is whether they'll be joined by independent presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. He has to meet a polling requirement of 15% in 4 recognised national polls. So far, he has reached that mark in 3. The last being more than a month ago, though. Kennedy is currently averaging a little above 7% in the average of national polls. An even tougher task for Kennedy has proven to be qualifying for the ballot in enough states to theoretically be able to win the presidency. That is another requirement for the debate. There's also the little matter that Joe Biden has only accepted an invitation to debate Donald Trump, not Kennedy as well.
That's an interesting little wrinkle, that. That might be more a factor in the second debate. As for this debate, according to the Kennedy campaign, he's already gained ballot access in 19 states with 278 potential electoral college votes. That means he's home for that second qualification, John. But according to CNN, and they're the ones who count, he is only on the ballot for 6 states, totalling 89 electoral college votes. Now, you might be wondering how that all works. Well, it turns out that states have no incentives to verify the signatures quickly for their ballots, so the process for certifying those ballots can take months. And in the meantime, Kennedy is just sitting there. He thinks he's got the signatures, but he's unable to qualify for a debate. So that sucks for him, because that deadline for the first debate, it's tomorrow. In response, Kennedy has launched a lawsuit alleging that neither Trump nor Biden are on state ballots either. People are just assuming they'll be their party nominees, he says. But we don't know that for a fact, says Kennedy, and so therefore, if they can debate, so can I. Well, we'll see how well that argument works out for Kennedy.
Yeah, we shall indeed. And Kennedy, of course, only has until tomorrow as well to get that extra 15% in a national poll. We'll see what happens there too. Meanwhile, broadcaster and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones is now being made to pay for peddling the false claim that the 2012 Sandy Hook massacre was a hoax staged by actors in order to impose stricter gun control laws. 20 first-grade children and 6 of their educators were shot and killed at the Connecticut elementary school, but Alex Jones repeatedly told his listeners to Infowars that it was all a fake. Some of those listeners then harassed and threatened the parents of the dead children. The parents then sued Jones for defaming them, and now
a federal judge in Houston ordered Jones to liquidate his personal assets, worth an estimated $4 to $6 million, to start paying the Sandy Hook families the $1.5 billion in defamation damages he owes them.
At this stage, the ruling allows Jones to keep broadcasting, in part so he can keep making money, so he can repay that still $1.5 billion that he owes in damages. That issue, though, caused a bit of a rift between some of the parents involved. Some wanted Jones and Infowars shut down completely, even if it meant they got less money in the long run. Meanwhile, last week, many of the survivors of the Sandy Hook shooting, who are now aged 17 and 18, graduated from high school. A bittersweet time remembering their 5- and 6-year-old classmates whose lives were cut short.
We can't forget about that there is a whole chunk of our class missing. And so going into graduation, we all have very mixed emotions, trying to be excited for ourselves and this accomplishment that we've worked so hard for, but also those who aren't able to share it with us who should have been able to.
And back on Infowars, Alex Jones was expressing some emotions of his own.
At the end of the day, we're going to beat these people. I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but it's been a hard fight. And these people hate our children.
So, who is Alex Jones and what motivates him? Is he as deeply deranged and cruel as his broadcast suggests, or is it all an act? Is he just selling conspiracy theories so he can sell diet supplements? Journalist and author Jon Ronson has spent years looking into the murkier corners of conspiracists and cults, frauds and fantasists. He was also one of the first to write about Alex Jones, long before most of us had ever heard of him. Jon Ronson, welcome to Planet America.
Hi, John. Hi, Chaz.
So what impact do you think this is going to have on Alex Jones? Liquidating his personal assets, but potentially allowing him to continue broadcasting and making some money?
God, that's a really hard question because I don't honestly know. I don't know whether Infowars is going to be shut down. The last I heard was that people don't generally know what's going to happen next, whether he can keep operating. I know he said that he's not going to work for anyone. And I really can't imagine Alex working for anyone. He'd rather burn Infowars down than be somebody's employee. But he'll probably just, do what Tucker Carlson or whoever did. They'll find their own niche somewhere else. We're living in a post-gatekeeper society where they can't be stopped. And rightly so. And if you argue for a semblance of free speech.
Now, you've known Alex Jones personally. So do you think he actually believes his conspiracies, or is it just for show?
Well, that's a really interesting question. That's probably the question I've been asked more than almost any other question in my life. At first, I thought he was a showman. Me and him snuck into the secret club together called Bohemian Grove in the forests of Northern California in the 1990s, this sort of elitist compound. And Alex kind of, lied about some of the things he saw in there. And when I confronted him about that, he kind of said, you know that, I know that, I'm not going to tell my listeners that. So I always, he told me that he'd overheard two old men of wealth and power muttering about getting somebody elected, like in these forests of Northern California. And I thought that was exactly the kind of thing Alex would have wanted to have heard rather than did hear. And he admitted that he was lying and he was doing it for sort of showman purposes. So for the longest time, I thought, oh, he's just a showman. But then I was talking to a sort of whistleblower employee of his who said, no, Alex is really, the Alex off screen is exactly the same as the Alex on screen. He's not a showman, he really means it. But I think there's a third potential answer, which is that he's a narcissist. He's a diagnosed narcissist. And narcissists don't really care about the truth. So it's not like, is he a showman, is he lying? It's like he doesn't really have the same relationship with truth that non-narcissists do. He just wants to be the smartest person in the room, and whatever he has to do to be that is fine by him. So whether it's true, whether it's lying, kind of doesn't matter to him, I would say.
Jon, even if Alex Jones doesn't, as you say, care about the truth, surely he must appreciate that denying Sandy Hook or the Oklahoma City federal building bombing or that 9/11 was an inside job, that all of that can be deeply hurtful to the victims and their families.
Oh my God, yeah. Alex changed. He really curdled in like the mid-2000s. The Alex who I first met back in the late 90s was a less malevolent, certainly less obviously malevolent figure. He was interested in Waco and Ruby Ridge and government overreach and that kind of stuff. And I think as a consequence, he got very rich. He started selling supplements and started making like $100,000 a day. And then he got proximity to power. Trump went on his show. And I think that, he drinks a lot. And I think a combination of all those things really kind of curdled him. And he became much more disinhibited, much more just allowing his id to come out and say the most disgusting things, especially obviously about the parents of the children murdered at Sandy Hook.
Were you surprised that Alex became the person he is today, or did you see it coming?
Well, I always knew that he was going to be big because the other conspiracy talk show hosts of the 1990s were just, boring old guys sitting in public access television studios just being very boring. And Alex came along as a kind of sensation. He'd have adventures, he'd confront people. He was just on a different level of talent than any of his contemporaries. So I always knew he was going to be big, and people really want, Art Bell in the 90s, there was an enormous audience for that kind of thing, and clearly still is. So I knew he was going to be big. I'd never anticipated that he would have the kind of proximity to power that he did. Having, Trump praise him was just, very startling to me. Knowing that Alex just makes stuff up all the time and doesn't care. So you don't want somebody like that to have the ear of a president. And the malevolence came as a surprise to me too. I didn't think he would do something as despicable as haunting the parents of children murdered in a school shooting. I did a little bit of research about his teenage years for This American Life. And it turns out that he was like a very, violent person at school before I knew him, in middle school and in high school. So I guess it was always there lying dormant.
Jon, in his own appalling way, Alex Jones is a very gifted broadcaster and communicator. I wonder if he does go away after all of this. Does his particular ideology go away with him, or is there another Alex Jones out there just waiting in the wings?
Well, he's certainly, as you say, unusually gifted as a broadcaster and an orator. He's incredibly watchable, and not many people are of that caliber. So I think if he did go away, which I think he won't, but if he did go away, I think a big chunk of it would go away. Yeah, there's an awful lot of people who get all of their conspiratorial fix from Alex. There's other, I guess, talented broadcasters like Russell Brand, who's sort of gearing up to, try and fit into that mold. But, Russell Brand isn't as good as Alex. To be honest, nobody is. Only Joe Rogan really is in that world is as talented a broadcaster. Joe Rogan's kind of moved to believing, or certainly being open to all of these, irrational thoughts is a little dispiriting. So, he seems to be moving into Alex's chair a little bit too much.
Jon Ronson, thanks for being with us on Planet America this week.
Thank you so much, John. And thanks, Chaz.
And John will be in Australia to perform a series of shows this coming November. President Biden spent the week juggling the demands of holding the most powerful political office on earth and campaigning to keep the job this week. Biden enlisted plenty of star power at a Los Angeles fundraiser on the weekend, hosted by actors Julia Roberts and George Clooney. The Biden campaign claimed that they raked in $28 million from the event, where the president also took part in a Q&A with his old boss, Barack Obama, and comedian Jimmy Kimmel. Almost 2 years after the constitutional right to an abortion was overturned by the US Supreme Court, Biden warned the crowd that the next president will probably appoint 2 new Supreme Court justices, so electing Trump would make it even more conservative.
The Supreme Court has never been as out of kilter as it is today. I mean, never.
And on what's expected to be his last foreign trip before the election, President Biden was in Europe for a meeting of G7 leaders in Italy. He also signed a 10-year security pact with Ukraine, committing the United States to Kyiv's defence against Russia.
Our goal is to strengthen Ukraine's credible defense and deterrence capabilities for the long term. A lasting peace for Ukraine must be underwritten by Ukraine's own ability to defend itself now and to deter future aggression anytime in the future.
And while Biden was there, he also brokered a deal with European allies to use seized Russian assets to send another $50 billion in aid to Ukraine to fund its rebuild. Although the uncertainty over the result of the upcoming American presidential election and Donald Trump's less than full support for Ukraine and NATO still casts something of a shadow over proceedings, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, though, was quick to praise Biden when asked about Biden's age and fitness for office and the prospect of a return of Trump.
I find it somewhat peculiar how there is speculation here about who will win the next American election. I think it is likely that the current president can also win the election.
Why?
Because he has pursued policies that have led to a solid economic development of the country, contributed to ensuring that peace and security are in good hands, and allowed the USA to play its role in the world effectively.
So, several big bits of news there. First, Biden says the Supreme Court is out of kilter, making the appointment of progressive or conservative justices by the next president a key election issue. Second, Biden extends military and financial assistance for Ukraine into the long term. And then, in a pretty unusual intervention, the leader of Germany talked up Joe Biden's chances of winning. And yet, Chaz, there was a lot more time this week spent talking about parachutes.
Sadly, there was, and that leads us nicely to this.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
It all started off with this seemingly innocuous moment at the G7 summit in Italy, when a few parachutists landed in front of the G7 leaders as part of an official ceremony. Most of those leaders hung together, but Biden was distracted by something to the right of screen, so he wandered off and he gave someone or other a thumbs up. Not exactly a capital crime, but as you can see, the RNC campaign account demanded to know what Biden was doing. Well, The New York Post sure wasn't going to help them find out. They cropped the video to eliminate all traces of context so that Biden looked like he was just wandering around in a vacant field for no reason whatsoever. And just in case that's too subtle, they then slapped it on their front page with a bunch of decontextualized photos and called it Meander in Chief. So, was Biden just roaming aimlessly around in the ether because he's super senile? Well, it might help if we run the 10 seconds before all those clips began. You can clearly see here that at least 4 parachutists had already landed. There they are. They were packing up their gear. One of those, by the way, had an American flag, so there's no prizes for guessing who Biden was giving that thumbs up to. Maybe you think I'm speculating, though, when I say Biden was simply heading over to talk to the parachutists. Well, the Washington Post obtained a different camera angle. You can see here in the bottom right that Biden is clearly addressing the parachutists. There is nothing senile about it. Malarkey debunked. Unfortunately, if you need to go all JFK to fact-check these misleading videos and there's a new one every day, then you've already lost. And literally, the next day, we had this.
Look at the Pope. He's freaking out. This can't be normal, can it?
Good question, Mr. President. Let's go to the video, shall we? Everyone was bending down to speak to the wheelchair-bound Pope, and Biden did exactly the same thing. Watch out for the camera switch there. Now, Biden might have gotten amusingly close when listening to the Pope, yes, but it wasn't exactly a problem. The Pope didn't seem too bothered. It was all just normal activity. They were just talking. But Twitter went wild again. Then 2 days later, we had this moment at the end of Biden's fundraiser. He waves to the crowd a bit and then he stands there for a while. That apparently is now enough to prove you're senile, by the way, just standing there. They call that freezing. And by the way, this was tweeted out by Piers Morgan, you'll notice, who then wrote about it in the, you guessed it, the New York Post. And Obama leads Biden off at the end, apparently to the old folks' home. Now, to be fair, we've got no idea what happened there. Maybe he did vague out. Jimmy Kimmel's spokesperson says that people in the front were shouting at Biden and he was trying to hear them. Maybe that's just spin, I don't know. But I do know that at the same time Biden was standing still, so was Jimmy Kimmel, looking at seemingly the same people. So you can make up your own mind about that. And since apparently standing still now means you're too old to be president, we have one more of these from a week ago. This was during the Juneteenth celebration. The RNC asks in the tweet why Biden isn't moving. Personally, I'm imagining Biden dancing. I think it was a very wise move on his behalf to not dance. But if staying dead still does mean he's too old to be president, I guess this guy on the right is also too old to be president because he's standing still as well. Just behold that dude's rampant senility. Look, to be clear, the White House press secretary has been implying that these videos are manipulated somehow.
They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith. The fact checkers have repeatedly caught them pushing misinformation, disinformation.
And to be clear, they're not manipulated. Those clips are 100% real. And I'm not saying that Biden isn't super old. I'm not even saying that age isn't a problem for Biden. What I'm saying is that these are decontextualized and heavily spun videos by the tweet that they are in. And they are clearly propaganda. And the conservative media, especially the New York Post, is going real hard on them at the moment. There was yet another one of them today. So the next time you see one of these videos, and that's probably going to be sometime tonight, let's face it, just see if you can find the original video, see if you can find some context, and try and keep your wits about you, because odds are it's malarkey.
Election 2024. What's at stake?
Are you prepared to fight? Are you prepared to give it all? Are you prepared to leave it all on the battlefield? Ladies and gentlemen, it's very simple. Victory or death.
And that is it for another trip to Planet America. We'll see you for a fireside chat on ABC News on Friday night.
And both shows are on the ABC, iView, YouTube and Facebook. We'll see you at the same time next week. Bye-bye.